Okay.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Uh, in many places, once they change the clock, so many shuls have what they call an early minyan, early Shabbos minyan, to take in Shabbos earlier. And I want to talk a little bit about it. I saw a line that I used for the title of today's discussion, coming early to the wedding. I thought it was a great line. The Gemara talks about early rabbis used to go out in the field Friday afternoon as the sun is setting to greet the Shabbos bride, to greet the Shabbos Kala. And we say it, Boi Chala, Boi Chala. It's the mystical union of the Jewish people with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Shabbos. So coming early to the wedding, making Shabbos early, I think it's a very appropriate title or concept. Making Shabbos early is really a misnomer, as we'll see in a moment. First of all, Shabbos begins when the day is over. We'll discuss what that means also. But there are a number of halachic issues and hashkafic issues associated with this whole concept of early Shabbos, and we have to review it and clarify it. If there is a concept, it's a machlokas rishonim, whether it's midrabanan or midoraisa, whether it's biblical or rabbinic, called Tosefes Shabbos. Tosefes Shabbos means we love Shabbos so much we want to add on to its sanctity. So that means starting Shabbos earlier, ending it later, to keep the ruach of Shabbos, the sanctity, kedusha of Shabbos, as long as we can, before we go back to our mundane lives. And it's fascinating that whether people are aware of it or not, every woman accepts Shabbos early, because candle lighting time is always 18 minutes or so before sunset, which means every time a woman lights candles and you are makabel Shabbos, you accept Shabbos when you light candles, you are in effect adding on, you are being makayim the mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos. You're adding on to Shabbos by doing that. Whether it's 18 minutes, whether it's some places it's 20 minutes, some places 10 minutes. It's not just to give you a little extra time before Shabbos begins, but it's to really the whole concept of Tosefes Shabbos. And it goes back to the earliest times of the Rishonim. Technically, and there are two technicalities that we have to understand. One is the astronomical reality. When the sun sets and the day is over, Shabbos begins. There's no question about it. There is a machlokas among Rishonim as to whether it's sunset versus when the stars come out. Rabbi Tam in Tosfos says that Shabbos doesn't really begin until nightfall, which is when the stars are out. So if somebody is in a traffic jam or there's an accident on the highway, whatever it might be, and you can't get home on time and it's getting later and later and later, there's Rabbeinu Tam in a pinch that you might be able to rely on, that the Shabbos starts a little bit later. I remember many years ago, there was a terrible snowstorm, and Jeff Packard was stuck in the city, and it got dark. And he just left his car somewhere in the middle of Manhattan, and he walked home to Fairlawn.
Oh, my God.
But I remember he did that. I remember Rabbi Fuld, when he was the principal at SAR. Again, the snowstorms always happen on Friday. And he had to wait until every kid got picked up from school. And then he got stuck in traffic on the Cross Bronx Expressway. And it was getting dark. So he and his children, a couple of boys in the car, they pulled off the highway and they parked the car in the Bronx somewhere in God knows what neighborhood. He knocked on a door, and he was very fortunate. It was the right door. The people took him in, and he spent Shabbos in some black person's house in the Bronx because it was getting dark. What do you do? He wasn't able to walk home to Queens, but he stayed. When it gets dark, Shabbos begins. What are you going to do? So as far as we are concerned, and hopefully we're not going to be caught in those type of circumstances and situations, when you're in shul, Shabbos begins when you say Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos. That's when Shabbos begins. At home, it begins when women light candles. For them, they are Mekabel Shabbos. And there's a discussion of, for those women that daven mincha, they should daven mincha before they light candles. Because after they light candles, it's already Shabbos. It's kind of hard to daven mincha when it's already Shabbos, although there are some poskim that would allow that. But in shul, Shabbos doesn't begin until you say Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos. And we see this in practical terms. If a person is in the middle of Shiva and they come to shul, they go out during L'chododi because Avelus still exists technically until the day is over. We allow people to prepare for Shabbos and get up from Shiva on Friday afternoon, but we send them out during L'chododi, and after L'chododi is over, the Avel comes in, and we recite Nicham Avelim, and then the Chazan says Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos because there's no Avelus on Shabbos, and that's when Shabbos begins. So that's another example of how we welcome Shabbos in. If you are Makabel Shabbos before its actual astronomical Shabbos, you are allowed to tell another person, a non-Jew or even another Jew who has not yet been Makabel Shabbos, to do something that is normally forbidden on Shabbos. That person can do it because for him it's not Shabbos yet, even though for you, although he shouldn't be doing it for you, but he can do certain types of malachos. But the whole notion of being Makabel Shabbos early, we talk about Tosefah Shabbos. I have never heard of a community being Makabel Shabbos early, making an early minyan during the winter. You don't have that because it's very clear that we're doing it for convenience. We're doing it for convenience because we want to have dinner at a reasonable hour. The children should still be up. So it makes sense to make Shabbos a little bit earlier, especially during the summer months. But again, if we're really strict about doing it for the right reasons, then maybe you should make early Shabbos in the wintertime too, and make Shabbos at 3:15 instead of 4:15. But I don't think that's going to catch on too much. The Kriya Shema that is said before it's dark should be repeated at home after Tzeisa Kochavim. There are some who are very, very makpid about making Kiddush at home before it gets dark, but generally we permit that and to make the Shabbos meal, just recite Kriya Shema over again when it gets dark. A very interesting machlokas, and the general practice is during Sfira, coming up on Pesach soon, during Sfiras HaOmer, you usually don't count Sfira until until it's nighttime. What do you do at the early Shabbos minyanim that start at 7 o'clock? And by the time you get to Aleinu, when you count Sfira, it's still daytime. It's not nighttime yet. So normally the announcement would be that don't forget to repeat Kriya Shema at home when it gets dark and to count Sfira. However, and this is something that I've always tried to teach people, but apparently it hasn't caught on. The Mishnah Brura, who is a reliable source, in his Be'er Halacha, he says as follows. Once the congregation has accepted upon itself Shabbos, that halachically it's already the next day. It's Shabbos. So you may count with a bracha, even though it's still daylight outside. Normally, this is not followed in most shuls. I don't know why. What they do very often in some places is that they'll make an announcement that the Shliach Tzibur will count Sfira with a bracha, and you should have in mind, and this is the condition, that if you forget later on to make your own sfira, it counts. If you remember later on, that you count the bracha later on. In other words, you answer amen to the shiach tzibur's bracha conditionally, that if I remember to count later, it doesn't count. But if I don't remember to count later, it does count. I'm not a big fan of that. If you're making a bracha already, let it count. But again, we have on whom to rely. The Mishnah Berurah says clearly, when you're makabel Shabbos early, you are making it the next day. Even though astronomically it's still daylight outside, you've been makabel Shabbos. And once you're makabel Shabbos, it's the next day, even though it's not dark, you can count sfira. And the Mishnah Berurah says it very, very clearly, for those congregations that makabel Shabbos before dark, it's perfectly okay to do that. And again, for a brief period of time, I was able to get this point across in Shomrei Torah, but after a while, they kind of went back to the old way of doing it and simply tell people, don't forget to count when you go home. And very often what happens after you have a big meal and you're tired and you're asleep, people forget. So that's an interesting halacha. A woman who didn't make her hefsek tara before being makabel Shabbos early, b'diavad can still do it afterwards. A baby that's born on Friday evening before sunset, even though the parents may have accepted Shabbos already, the bris will still be on Friday morning. And the bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah will also be on their Friday birthday, even though you were makabel Shabbos early. If you had a yahrzeit for a parent who died before sunset on a Friday, even though Shabbos was already accepted, nevertheless, the Hebrew date is that Friday, even though you were makabel Shabbos. The big question is, how early can you make Shabbos on a Friday afternoon? So the halacha is that you can make Shabbos anytime after plag mincha. Difficult term to translate, plag ha-mincha. Plag ha-mincha is usually 1.25 sha'os zmanios, a halakhic hour before the end of the day. So we have a number of concepts to wrestle with. First of all, a halakhic hour is not 60 minutes long. It could be 50 minutes long, it could be 70 minutes long. It depends how many hours of daylight there are. You take the amount of daylight, you divide it into 12, and that becomes a halakhic hour. Okay, so a 1.25 halakhic hour before the end of the day is plag ha-mincha. From that point on, you can daven early Shabbos. However, how do you define the halachic day? When does the day begin? When does it end? And this is a big, big machlokas. Does the day begin from alos hashachar until tzeis hakochavim? Alos hashachar is the appearance of the morning star, which is very early. It's before sunset. Do you divide the day from the alos hashachar until the stars come out, which is a longer day? Or do you say it's sunrise to sunset, which is a shorter day? So most people follow the second. It's a big machlokas in Magen Avram and the Vilna Gaon. It affects us most of the time in terms of when you can start davening, how early in the morning you can start davening. It also affects us in terms of when you can yicham et erev Pesach. There are a lot of important halachas here, but clearly it also affects how early you can start Shabbos. How do you divide the day? Okay, from plag ha-mincha on, but how do you define plag ha-mincha? So we usually follow the Magen Avram, not the Vilna Gaon in this case, and we go from sunrise to sunset. And that's the normative. But some people, again, have other shitos. There are some places in certain Hasidic communities that are very, very makpid not to start Shabbos early under any circumstances. The Vilna Gaon was very, very strong about this, that even on Friday night, you shouldn't say Ma'ariv until after Tzeis HaKochavim. When it's really, nobody argues that it's Shabbos then. And again, there are also some poskim who hold that the Shabbos meal itself should be eaten on Shabbos, real Shabbos, and not the extension of Shabbos. But again, the real reason why we make Shabbos early is not necessarily for convenience, but initially it was done to add on to the sanctity of Shabbos. This is called Tosefes Shabbos, and that's the real reason. According to the Shulchan Aruch, it's a mitzvah doraisa. Tosfos holds that way. The Vilna Gaon says it's Rabbi, but clearly the Shulchan Aruch says that Tosefes Shabbos is a biblical mitzvah. So you have to be very, very careful about this.
Wally.
Yes.
When Markowitz actually announced we started our first Friday night early davening to make sure that you have a piece of bread, a piece of challah after it becomes dark.
Yes, you have to have at least a kazayas of challah after Seis HaKachavim, according to many, many poskim, because you're not yotzei the Suda of Shabbos otherwise. There are circumstances when it is not recommended to take on Shabbos early. If you are an emergency responder, for example, you should probably never take upon Shabbos early because you never know when you're going to be called, even though you have all kinds of heterim to go out on Shabbos as well when lives are endangered. But Shmir Shabbos and Hilchasa and others say very clearly that first responders should not be Makabel Shabbos early. And an interesting question comes up about a soldier who's going into battle, and he doesn't know if he'll be able to pray on the proper Zman. Can he daven Ma'ariv early? Can he be Makabel Shabbos early? It's also an interesting question. Can you light candles on the condition that you're not accepting Shabbos? Normally we say no, because lighting candles is being Makabel Shabbos. There's a lot of fascinating discussion on this, but again, clearly the main reason should not be necessarily convenience, but it should be to Makabel the mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos, adding on to the Kedusha of Shabbos. Again, the machlokes, it's a whole Gemara in Brachos and the whole discussion among poskim, as to how do you define the day? And again, alos hashachar to tzeis, or from sunrise to sunset, and that will affect how early you can make Shabbos as well. The poskim do talk about this in great length. But again, the motivating factor should not necessarily be convenience, but it should be the fact that we are being Makabel Shabbos early to enjoy Shabbos and bring in Shabbos, the Ruach of Shabbos.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Did I understand you to say something about lighting Shabbos candles, but not actually in your mind and heart bringing in Shabbos yet?
Well, if you are a soldier going into battle, you can do that. In the Israeli army, it's a real question. If soldiers are away from home, they would light candles. Their wives would do it at home. But if you're in a camp someplace in Lebanon, and it's Friday afternoon, and you have to go out on a patrol, but it's almost Shabbos, so you would light candles, but not be Makabel Shabbos until it gets dark. But the candles will be lit.
But that doesn't apply.
Not in normal circumstances. Not normally, no.
I think by Yom Kippur, a lot of women do that.
Well,
Right.
They light the candles with it tonight because they want to go with the car to go to
Correct.
So they do it then.
On Erev Yom Kippur, women do that all the time, or even Erev Yontif sometimes. People can do that. You light and not have kavanah to be yotzei until you get to shul or get to wherever you're going.
So is that frowned upon?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
Not at all. It's perfectly acceptable because the condition that you establish in your mind tells you when the effect of lighting the candle actually becomes actualized, when it goes into effect. The whole notion of Kabbalah Shabbos, by the way, it is a fascinating concept by itself. Davening on Friday nights begins with really Baruch Hu, we say Mizmor Shir as introduction to Shabbos. Mariv, we say Mizmor Shir, Shabbos begins at that point, and then we go to Baruch Hu. But every shul in the world davens Kabbalah Shabbos before they get to Mariv. Where'd that come from? The Gemara doesn't know anything about Kabbalah Shabbos. Most Rishonim know nothing about Kabbalah Shabbos. On Friday afternoon after Mincha, they would say Mizmor Shir, and then they go right to Baruch Hu. Where did this come from? And the whole development of the Siddur and our davening is a fascinating subject. This all began with the Talmidim of the Ari, not the Ari himself, his students. He was one of the great Kabbalists, and it's interesting. The Ari's name was Yitzchak Luria Ashkenazi, and he's called throughout history as Ashkenazi Rabbi Yitzchak, the Ari. That's how he's known. I say, great Kabbalist, influenced many different streams of Judaism, especially among Hasidic thought. But he was the one that introduced Kabbalah Shabbos. Excuse me 1 second. Somebody just rang my doorbell. Excuse me, I apologize. Today, Earl. Good to see you. Great. How's the winter? Good. Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk to you for a minute.
Okay, I'm in the middle of something on Zoom. Phone.
Yeah, about the
What? Do the spring cleaning.
Yeah. I have somebody about you because I got to leave till about August, so I have somebody bring to you.
Somebody else is gonna come.
Yeah.
Good, no problem. You trust him, I trust him.
Okay. All right. So you can come and do whatever you want to do, right?
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that. The Talmidim of the Ari are the ones that put together what we call Kabbalah Shabbos, which is essentially 7 prokim of Tehillim. Doesn't require a minyan, no davar shebekdusha. 7 chapters, very similar to Sheva Brachos. Again, we're greeting the Shabbos Queen, Shabbos Malkasa. And this became so entrenched in Judaism that there is not a community anywhere in the world today that does not do Kabbalah Shabbos. And this is all because of the impact of the students of the Ari. L'chadodi was written by Shlomo Alkabetz, one of his students. If you ever have a chance to visit Tzfat, there's an old cemetery in Tzfat on the side of a mountain on a big hill. It's a terribly unkempt cemetery. It's very hard to get to. But Shlomo Alkabetz is buried there. The Ari is buried there. Many great Rabbanim are buried on that hillside in Tzfat. If you ever get the chance to go there, visit those graves. It's an amazing experience. Just don't go on their yard site because it's very crowded then. But which is, I think, the 16th or 18th of Tammuz, somewhere around there. In any event, Kabbalah Shabbos has become accepted as part of our davening, even though it's just Prokim of Tehillim. L'chadodi is sung all over the world. And Shabbos begins, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. Avelus is suspended at that point, and that's when Shabbos really begins. You can't do any malacha. You can be Makabel Shabbos early, not too early, only an hour and a half before the Shabbos begins. You can't go too much earlier than that. But also, here's the strange thing, and I'll just finish with this. Many communities are very makbid to start Shabbos early. I don't know how many modern communities are also makbid to end Shabbos later. We want to extend the Kedusha of Shabbos, so let's end Shabbos later than necessary, instead of rushing to get out as soon as we can. Because there's an illogical inconsistency there. If we want to increase the Kedusha of Shabbos by starting it early, if that is our motivation, as opposed to simply convenience, then we should extend on the other end as well. And if we're going to be consistent, although sometimes consistency is not our strongest point. I remember when I was in camp, outside camp, there was a Satmar bungalow colony. And as we were going out on Saturday night to get ice cream or pizza or something, it was like 10:30, 11:30 at night. They were still sitting having shalashudas because they were extending their Shabbos. So if we're extending it, we should extend it on both ends. If the purpose is for Tosefes Shabbos and not simply for convenience. Anyhow, it's going to a wedding. We're greeting the Shabbos Kala, and it's not nice to leave her alone too early. So we should think about ending Shabbos a little bit later and not being in a rush to end Shabbos early. If we're taking in Shabbos early, we should let it go a little bit longer on the other end as well.
Wally,
Yes.
why, when Shabbos coincides with Yontiv, do we not do Kabbalah Shabbos?
Because you're already in a state of I can get kedusha, whatever it might be. You're already in a kedusha mode, shall we say? And you don't want to mix too many different things together. So you don't need the whole purpose of Kabbalah Shabbos. Again, it's not a halachic ritual. It is a custom that has become accepted all over the world. Shabbos begins with Baruch Hu, Yontif begins with Baruch Hu. You don't say Kabbalah Shabbos when Yontif goes into Shabbos, because you are already in that mode, so to speak. So you don't need any extra kadoshifying, if I can use that expression. That's an expression of Rabbi Riskin. We don't have to add any extra kadoshifying to the mix. You're already in a kadosh mode. If you have Yontif going into Shabbos, that's why you don't need Kabbalah Shabbos, which again is a custom. If you don't say, if somebody didn't say Kabbalah Shabbos and just started with Mizmor Shiur, halachically you wouldn't be doing anything wrong. Although by now it's become accepted as part of halachic practice, but it's purely minhag. I mean, the first sitter, the first couple Sidurim, the Siddur of Amram Gaon, the Siddur of Rav Sadia Gaon, the Machzor Romi, the early first Sidurim that were published did not have Kabbalah Shabbos. That did not begin until the 15th century with the students of the Ari. And it's become accepted and L'chododi all over the world. I'll leave you with a question that I haven't found a good answer to. Why is it that it's become customary, pretty much universal, to change the tunes in the middle of L'chododi? When you get to Lo Sevoshi, it's a different tune. Why do we change tunes? I have asked this question of many, many great cantors. I asked Ben Sion Schenker this question. I asked Velvo Pasternak, great musicologist, this question. Nobody had a good answer for me. I'm looking for an answer for years. If somebody can find an answer, I'd love to hear it. Why we change tunes in the middle of L'chododi?
Wally?
Yes.
I heard that originally each stanza was sung with a different tune. And this is a remnant of that.
Interesting. Where'd you hear that from?
I don't recall. But it was a way for the Chazan or Baltfila to show off his capabilities.
Yeah, I'd never heard that. Okay. Anything else?
Well, also, Wally, aren't the speeds of the tunes different from the first part to the second? Usually the first part is slower and the second part is more a little bit quicker.
So the other,
It depends on who your Baltfila is and which tune he picks.
Yeah, but usually I always find that the first part is like very a little slower, and then when they get to the second part, it kind of speeds up a little bit.
Not necessarily. Some tunes are pretty quick from the beginning.
First, yeah.
It depends on what tune the
Listen.
person picks.
Okay, well, listen on Friday night and see if this is what I've been hearing over the years in Shomrei Torah. And by the way, just as a plug for Shomrei Torah, that we started our first early Mincha Kabbalah Shabbos this week. We actually had more people at our minyan than the regular minyan. So I guess I think we had more people this year for the starting Shabbos than any year that we've been doing.
Everybody wants to add extra Kedusha to their Shabbos. Absolutely. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Okay.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Right.